How I missed my first NHS interview. This is the story I want to share with you in this video. Should I call it a story? I don't think it's a story, but whatever it is, I'm sharing this with you because I know there's a moral lesson in here you have to learn, especially if you are seeking for jobs in the UK in an NHS hospital. Okay, so I got on to track.jobs, which happened to be one of the UK nursing sites, and then I came across this NHS hospital that was actually recruiting at that time. So I read through the job overview, the person specifications, the job description, and everything. So at the latter part of the information, there was this clause that says that they do not actively do recruitment from certain countries, but they use an agency. So possibly, if you are applying from any of these countries, reach out to that agency. And that was my first time I had come across that agency. So fast forward, I went in to send an email to this agency, and they requested for my document, as usual, your nursing qualification, police clearance, your IELTS test report form, screenshot of your CBT, and then they also requested for a screenshot of my UK NMC dashboard, which I did. I did send all these documents. After submitting these documents, I didn't hear from them. I went on to do my application as and when I was capable. So after a week or two, I received an email from them stating that they've shortlisted me for an interview with the hospital, and they sent me the details, the time, and everything. In fact, I was very happy because that was my first interview after many job applications, and I didn't want to play with it at all. I started preparing very well for this interview, and the good thing is that this agency picked me up and they started showing me some of the tricks and techniques I need to inculcate to possibly get a job. So they sent me an ebook that consisted of interview tips. I remember sharing this document with some colleagues when I did the video conferencing meeting. About how to pass an NHS interview. I remember the day of the interview, I was for an afternoon shift. So what I did was I had to speak with one of my colleagues to cover up for me because I think the interview was around, as per the time they gave me, it was around 1 p.m. thereabouts. So I had to make myself ready. As at that time I should be preparing for my shift, and I didn't know how long the interview was going to last, so I had to speak with a friend to stand in for me. Now I got myself prepared. I set up the necessary equipment I needed to make the interview a success. I made sure I dressed very well because as it is said, the way you dress is how you be addressed. Okay. And I also made myself ready 10 minutes before the interview time, so probably everything was set. I tested my earpiece and everything to make sure that things were working. My internet connection was tested to make sure that at least I'm not left in the middle of nowhere. And all I was ready for the interview. I remember when it was about 5 minutes to the interview, I clicked on the link hoping that the interviewer would meet me in the meeting, and it's like 10 minutes had passed, 20 minutes had passed, 30 minutes, getting to 1 hour, and the interviewer has not appeared. What's happening? And the mistake I did was, to avoid distractions and everything with regards to an interview session, you have to turn your phone on silence, or if possibly just turn it off to avoid any distraction, which I did. Now, the trouble with me was that, you see, I missed the time. I forgot the fact that UK and then Ghana time are not the same. UK is ahead of Ghana 1 hour, usually in the summer, but in the winter the time is the same. So what happened was, instead of me looking at just checking the time accurately so that I make myself ready before that, I felt like Ghana and then UK had the same time. So the interview was 2 p.m. UK time, which meant that the time in Ghana at that time should have been 1 p.m. So I should have made myself ready probably, let's say, 15 minutes before the interview time. So I was waiting for 2 p.m. to come over, and I had lost that interview. So when I had waited and waited that there was no one coming into the meeting, I turned on my phone and then called the agency and said, "You have scheduled me for an interview today, but I've waited and waited. No one is coming in to interview me. What's actually happening?" And they were like, "The meeting has closed because the interviewer said I never turned up." It got me confused. What is the interviewer saying? What is actually happening? I had made myself ready like 10 minutes before the time. So what is the interviewer saying? So they kept on interrogating me to know what the problem was, and basically the time difference. And then the sad aspect is that they said they tried calling me to make me aware of the situation, or to tell me that the interviewer is waiting for me and that I have to join, wherever I am. And to no avail, my phone was turned off. Now, what advice will I give in this regard, or what can you learn from these concepts? First of all, I remember in my live interview sessions teaching about how to pass an NHS interview, I shared with my colleagues that make sure that if you are given a time for an interview, you input this in Google Calendar. Now, what's the essence of this? This is very important because when the time is due, probably you get notification from Google Calendar. Usually you get notification 30 minutes before the time. So this is something I didn't do. The second thing I also say is that, well, it's advised that you would want to avoid distraction, maybe calls coming through, WhatsApp notification and a whole lot of that. But at least the best you can do is not to turn your phone off completely. You can put it on silence, but make sure that at least it's close by, so that if there's a call coming through, you can see. Okay, for me, I think I wouldn't have missed that interview if my phone was not turned off and that the agency had been able to reach me. At least I would have been prompted to the time. So when I missed that interview, I felt so bad. I remember that day when I got to work, it's like my mind was really preoccupied. I was not really concentrating on what I was doing. And it did affect me in a way. My day became so moody. I became so quiet because I felt like I had missed a great opportunity, and moreover, I also felt like I had wasted my time and energy preparing for an NHS interview because I had sleepless nights to practice this. And in the twinkling of an eye, everything is gone. So there are so many ways that you can possibly miss an interview, in the sense that you are missing out on the actual time, in the sense that you are not really preparing very well. You see, don't take your first interview for granted. Don't take your first interview for granted, because you may not know the outcome of the subsequent ones. So for me, I felt so bad. I felt so worried. And I felt like I had betrayed myself. I had betrayed my future. All because I couldn't keep my eyes glued to the time. At this point, it was much more of negotiation time. I had to call my agency once more to plead with them to see if they can really talk to this NHS hospital, or the recruiters, or the interviewers, to reschedule me for another interview. And from the conversation we had, I felt like there was no assurance that this was going to be a possibility. But God being so good, they came back to me and said they've had a chat with the NHS hospital and they rescheduled me for another interview, which was probably 3 days after. And this time, I was very much careful. Now, I know you've learned a bit of lesson in here, and if not for anything, I know that possibly keeping an eye on the time is very important. And then not taking your first interview for granted is also important. And then preparing very well is also important. It's not really going to be easy getting a UK nursing job or being shortlisted for an interview, but when you get one, give it your all. Thank you.